Today on a fresh news sports burst, Jamie Easton, our Spanish football correspondent, sits down with Frenkie De Jong ahead of a big Champions League quarterfinal against Bayern Munich. Plus, the conductor of our transfer train is Martin Odegaard, as the player is wanted by Zinedine Zidane back at the Santiago Bernabeu. We'll have plenty on that, plus the Europa League today and yesterday. Sevilla trying to follow in the footsteps of both Manchester United and Inter as they take on Wolves today in a decisive match. I'm Andres Cordero. This is Sports Burst. Hello and welcome into a fresh news sports burst. I'm Andres Cordero. Joining me on the show in just a moment is Thomas Rongen. But we begin today in the Champions League because it's a little bit of a different look for the top continental competition in Europe. Single elimination, 4 games remaining, 8 teams are left, 1 game per day. And the marquee match is arguably on Friday when Barcelona take on the German champions, the Bundesliga winners, Bayern Munich. That is a mouth-watering contest. Frenkie De Jong coming off one of his best performances for Barcelona so far this season. The Barca themselves looking a little bit lackluster at times. Well, our Spanish football correspondent, Jamie Easton, sat down with Frenkie to talk about that big clash against the Bavarian Giants. Here's part of that interview.
According to everybody who saw the game, including myself, you're one of the most incredible players that day. Do you feel that it was one of your best performances since you arrived to Barcelona?
Yeah, I don't know. It's up to other people to tell it, but I think it was okay. Yeah, I think it was an okay match. I think we did good as a team as well because we won the game, which Napoli is a difficult opponent, and we had a good lead at half time, so we were a bit more comfortable in the second half. We were a bit more back, but no, I think at the end we won 3-0 at the Champions League out stage, which was good.
Returning to the game against Napoli, winning that game meant to go to Lisbon and to play the Champions League. How is the team right now? Because this is what all the Barcelona supporters want to know. Are you confident?
Yeah, of course we are always confident because we are having one of the best teams in the world, and we have a lot of world-class players, so we're always confident. I think there's a positive energy since we came back from the short break after the La Liga. So no, there's a really positive energy, and so I think we're fine as a team. We're good.
It's shocking from outside to see how everybody, or nearly everybody, takes for granted that Bayern Munich are the favorites, because it's very difficult to find a game where Barcelona is not considered a favorite. Do you agree? And if that role of being the underdog can benefit even Barcelona?
To be honest, I don't mind who is the favorite or what people are saying who is the favorite. I think yeah, they can decide it. For me, it doesn't matter who's the favorite. We will see how the game goes. Of course, Bayern is a really good team. They are in good shape at the moment. But we will see what happens on Friday, and then after the match, we can say who was the best team.
Because this is a different edition of the Champions League. It's an express edition where anything can happen. Have you thought about this, and can that benefit or harm you as a team? Because this is a different edition of the Champions League. It's an express edition where anything can happen. Have you thought about this, and can that benefit or harm you as a team?
Yeah, both ways. But I think it's a little advantage for the underdog because it's more easy to surprise a team in one game than when you're having a home and an away game. So I think it's a bit a small advantage for the underdogs.
Interesting chat between Jamie Easton and Frenkie De Jong. Thanks as always to Jamie for sending us that. We'll have more on that conversation for you throughout the week. A Frenkie De Jong who didn't sound all that excited about Barcelona's status as a potential underdog for this. And so with that, let's welcome in Thomas Rongen, our sort of resident Dutchie. Thomas, good to talk to you again. How are you?
Good, Trey. How you doing?
Good, good. Frenkie De Jong coming off of a good performance for a Barcelona that was good enough to knock off what has been a very good Napoli team. Napoli very decent side post-pandemic or post-break. They were the Coppa Italia winners, but it was a game in which Barcelona were always the favorites to advance. That is not the case with Friday's contest, and we're going to talk a bit about these Champions League matchups. We'll begin with Barcelona against Bayern Munich. Do you agree with what seems to be the general consensus that Bayern are heavy favorites in this matchup?
Yes, based on performances of both clubs this year, in all competitions, so to speak, Bayern should be the favorite. In saying that, Frenkie De Jong is absolutely right in saying that in one-off games, he even said the underdog might be the favorite, might be able to spring a surprise instead of the home and away series that I think will favor both teams if they were that case. But in a one-off game, being the underdog is not a bad thing right now, which means the expectations aren't very high, although expectations for Barcelona and Bayern Munich are always high. But one thing I want to say about this interview, Dre, and you and I talked about that, Frenkie De Jong's reluctance to be aggressive in the game, and you and I both talked about positive forward play, positive forward running, and his interview, and by the way, his English is good, because he's given interviews in the past when he played for Ajax, was more aggressive, was more assertive. It's almost a guy right now that's going very cautious in what he says, and it translates in being very cautious on the field. And I hope that will change, because when the game wore on, we saw a better Frenkie De Jong.
I wonder, Thomas, if you agree with this, but I think often the game of Barcelona's midfielders is conditioned by the lack of really aggressive pressing from at least two of the front three. And when you look at the front three that played against Napoli, was Messi behind Griezmann and Luis Suarez. And I think they actually pressed quite effectively at times in their own way. But it's not a high-intensity, up-the-pitch kind of pressure meant to win the ball back really, really close to the 18, as we've seen with Barcelona in years past. A lot of that probably to do with the fact that most of the key players on the team are 30 years or over, and so maybe don't have the same energy for that constant press. But I wonder if maybe that has something to do with a more conservative approach from some of the midfielders like Frenkie De Jong, like Sergio Roberto at times.
Without a doubt, Dre. But their system right now, the way they play, and the only way, not the only way, but the most important way to press is to play out of a 4-3-3 with wingers. Because if balls turn over in corners, for instance, the Messis, the Suarez, the Griezmanns are very centrally. Now you've got to come 30, 40 yards to maybe join a Sergio Roberto or to join an Alba that might be higher up the pitch. When you have initially those wide players and those fullbacks and those three midfielders that have become 4 and sometimes 5 and very centrally, it becomes almost impossible in a good, balanced, organized, compact way to press all the time. And that's, I think, the dilemma that Barca is facing right now. Do we press? Can we press? And maybe it's better for us to drop and be more of a team that, keeps the ball, but also looks to counter at times.
We are, by the way, monitoring your comments via the Facebook chat. So as always, continue to send in your questions, your comments, your mom's favorite recipes. Gino Fuentes, one of our own, writes, I love this do-or-die format, World Cup level nerves. I do too. I think it's wildly entertaining, and we saw a bit of that in the Europa League with the one-offs the last couple of days. We'll get to those in a moment. Daniel Ikome Jr. writes, Bayern will win the Champions League. I think most people consider either Bayern Munich or Manchester City to be the heavy favorites this time. Worth noting that of the 8 teams remaining, only 2 have actually won the Champions League before. They are the 2 that are facing off on Friday, so one of those 2 is going home. And there's a good possibility that unless Barcelona or Bayern Munich win the Champions League, we're going to have a new first-time European champion crowned this season, in what has been a strange season. Ray writes in saying, one thing people forget is it's one game. If there was home and away, yes, Bayern 100%. One game is all Barca needs, and we all know how they are. Richard Murray, who's always chiming in, says, competitively it is better, but how can they turn this format into the level of fiscal profitability as a two-legged for both teams on sponsors? The reality is they probably can't, which is why we're going to eventually, I believe, return to the knockout stages. I love the single elimination format for something like domestic cups. For example, in La Liga, they waited ages until finally this past season, they changed the format up, made it more like a traditional domestic cup match where you do play just a single elimination match. In fact, at the pitch of the smaller team of the lower division side, and that made for one of the most wildly entertaining Kings Cups in a long time. And as a result, you ended up with two teams in the final that maybe wouldn't be there under the other format, Real Sociedad and Athletic Club. But I digress. I love the format. I think it's going to come back to home and away once things are normal, as you mentioned, Richard, because there's money to be made, and if you play 2 legs, you make more money, potentially. Thomas, is this the game that you're looking forward to the most, or is there another of these Champions League matches that you're most excited about this week?
They're all intriguing matches, Dre. You and I recently done a PSG game. What's going on with Mbappe? Is this Neymar's year? Atalante. I mean, I can't speak volumes about this, in my opinion, a dark horse that could make a run. We've done Atletico Madrid games. I think this format favors an Atletico Madrid over an Atalanta, in my opinion, because Atalanta wants to outscore the opponents, whereas Atletico is happy to win 1-0. And in a 90-minute game or 90-plus one-off game, I still think that a team like Atletico Madrid could potentially do some damage and get to the finals of that lower bracket with PSG, RB Leipzig, obviously, and Atalanta. And Manchester City is always a team that is great with Pep Guardiola, but sometimes Pep overthinks or outthinks himself. They're still giving up goals at times, but they can outscore an opponent. Atalanta, Manchester City will be a great final, in my opinion. They're all intriguing matchups, especially because they're one-off games.
Yeah, I actually agree that even more so than Bayern Barca, the game that I'm most excited about, just because I genuinely, for example, I'll just flat out, I believe Bayern are heavy favorites over Barcelona. I believe City are heavy favorites. I believe Atletico are heavy favorites. I don't believe that Paris are heavy favorites over Atalanta. I believe they're the more talented team. A lot depends on the fitness, just how close to 100% Kylian Mbappe is, whether he'll be able to start. If he does, how many minutes he'll play. I think has a lot to do with how good Paris could be against Atalanta. But even at full strength, which Paris were at full strength, I believe, against Saint Etienne until the injury to Kylian Mbappe. They sort of grinded their way through those 2 cup finals. After the long layoff for Paris, they played a few friendlies against some lower league sides. I guess the best team that they warmed up against in those friendlies was Celtic, the Scottish champions, but for the most part, it was teams in either lower leagues or lower divisions, like in the case of Le Havre. So I don't know that this Paris has really the rhythm, the tempo, the momentum, the intensity that maybe an Atalanta does, where they've been playing meaningful Serie A games until just the other day with much more regularity. And I think that word intensity, the pace with which Atalanta play, it is what Jurgen Klopp calls rock and roll football. They're happy to trade blows with you. They're going to try and press you back into your own goal. They are not as talented as Paris Saint-Germain. They're not even remotely close to the talent level of PSG, but collectively they play with so much energy that I think they can cause some real good problems. And so the reason that I'm looking forward to Atalanta PSG more than any other match is because I think that's the one that I have the most questions about in terms of who's actually going to win that.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, although the interesting part is if you look at inform or you look at rhythm that you talked about, game to game, every weekend playing a game, which is important, which PSG hasn't done, and they haven't found their groove yet. Then you look at Lyon. Lyon gets a result against Juventus. And you can say that Serie A went the longest in terms of having teams competitive playing games against good opponents. So you felt that Juve was way ahead of Lyon from that standpoint, and that game didn't necessarily show that. So again, one-off games right now are throw everything out of the window, including rhythm, I think, and chemistry and games played. It's to me a toss-up, quite frankly, in all games for that matter. Although there are favorites on paper, I wouldn't be surprised if we see potentially surprises of the underdogs, be it Barcelona or be it Atalanta winning games.
Yeah, my underdog, by the way, is less Atalanta and more Atletico Madrid, but we'll talk about that some other time. We'll move on with some of your comments here. Messi and Lewandowski, this from Jack Mael Calderon. Messi and Lewandowski are both coming out of some great games, so spirits are high for a great game. I believe the broadcasters immediately after the Barcelona win immediately went into the Cristiano-Messi conversation, which is tired and sort of irrelevant for this moment. I think the Messi-Lewandowski argument is a really good one because these are the two players that arguably have had the best seasons of anybody in Europe. And I'm putting both ahead of the likes of Ciro Immobile and Cristiano Ronaldo, who scored a ton of goals, but also a ton of penalties. Lewandowski was spectacular this season, and Messi in his own right, leading La Liga in both goals and assists. David Martin writes, I don't think this knockout stage favors Barca. I don't believe they will make it through to the next round. I think those two things are not mutually exclusive necessarily, right? So you can believe that they won't make it to the next round because they're playing against Bayern Munich, who arguably are the best team remaining in the Champions League, if not the best team in the world. But I do think the format actually favors Barcelona. I think Barca are happy to play this at a neutral ground as opposed to having to go to the Allianz Arena and playing Bayern Munich in Bavaria. Barca have really struggled away from home, and I think the fact that it's a neutral ground sort of takes away that home-away dynamic. Brendan Burns writes, will Paris bring Mbappe in the match if he's needed at the half? Try to keep him out there, use him if needed. He's young, he might recover. We don't know to what extent he'll be back yet, so I don't know that we can have too much of an opinion there. Barca won the match against the 7th team in Serie A, says Daniel Franco Vidal. And all of the fans already consider the team a favorite. A couple of things there, Daniel. I don't think most fans consider Barca the favorite against Bayern Munich. I think the consensus tends to be the other way. And the other thing, I think people are being very disrespectful with Napoli. I heard this a lot in Spanish radio, listening to Cadena Cope, Cadena Ser. They made it sound like Napoli were a nothing team. And Napoli, remember, the first 15 games of the season were under Carlo Ancelotti, and they were disastrous. Ancelotti was there because Napoli had hopes to make it deep into the Champions League. Ironically, they've made it relatively deep without Ancelotti. But after those 15 games, Gattuso took over, and Gattuso's version of Napoli has been one of the top 5 or 6 teams in Serie A. In fact, I think if you apply Gattuso's points per game to an entire 38-game season, Napoli finished ahead of Milan, and everybody's been full of praise for what Milan have been able to do this season. We're going to move along from there because it's rare that the transfer train is talking about done deals, but this is an easier deal to get done because it's a player that already belongs to Real Madrid, and that is Zinedine Zidane wants Martin Odegaard back at the Santiago Bernabeu. And so it looks as though while things appeared to be headed toward Odegaard having one more season on loan at Real Sociedad, he is headed back to Madrid. Do you like this move, Thomas? Do you think it's time for Odegaard to go back, especially if it's Zidane personally who's calling on him?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a very interesting relationship between Odegaard and Real Madrid, and between Odegaard and Zidane. When Zidane had him in 2015 at the Castillas, we all know that Zidane didn't particularly care for Odegaard during that spell. And they loaned him out to the Netherlands, and they loaned him out again. And now all of a sudden, Zidane does a U-turn and says, you know what, he's got a 2-year deal. I know it's only 1 year. I want him back right now. You can, on paper, say he's a replacement for James Rodriguez. But I think you got to go beyond that. You got to look at Modric. You got to look at Kroos as well. You got to look at Isco and Asensio, because those are the guys that he will be competing against. 2 older guys, 2 young guys that have shown the last few years that are not always capable of staying fit throughout the season, be that from a off the field, sometimes situations with Isco and Asensio, be it to injuries as well. So based on his performance, and I think that Zidane fell in love with him finally at the 4-3 Copa game that Sociedad beat Real Madrid, when Odegaard was absolutely brilliant. Not a great restart for La Real, but I think it's time for Odegaard to become part of that selection and get some playing time next year.
Right, so that's actually where I wanted to go next. So I'm glad you said the phrase exactly as you did, get some playing time. And I invite you guys in the comments to chime in here as well, because do you think that by the end of this next season, Martin Odegaard will have won a starting spot, a regular role for Real Madrid?
You go ahead, and I'll bounce off you. What do you think?
So I think he will, actually, because there's one spot in that midfield that seems up for grabs. If you're assuming that Zidane's favorite formation, favorite system is that 4-3-3, which would include Hazard on one wing, Benzema in the middle, and someone else. I'm not sure who's going to be on the right next season, whether it's Asensio or whether they fortify that position with somebody else. It certainly doesn't look like it's going to be Gareth Bale or James. They'll probably look to move those guys. Then you consider there's two places in the midfield that are absolutely locked down, and that is Casemiro and Toni Kroos. Beyond that, Modric will be a year older. And Fede Valverde, who was the regular starter up until the long break for the pandemic, and I thought gave them a ton of energy, who really set the pace, set the tempo for them in terms of their defensive effort, in terms of their press, seemed to lose that job out to Modric, who maybe is a better technical player after the long stretch, because obviously Modric has had some time to rest those legs, and his age wasn't quite as big of a factor. And I think in some ways, Odegaard could be that more creative, more attacking, more forward-thinking third piece of the midfield, which would be a really nice complement to both Casemiro and Toni Kroos. And so if I see a straight competition, I don't know if they're going to bring back Dani Ceballos or whatnot, but if I just see a straight competition between Fede Valverde, Martin Odegaard, and Luka Modric, based on what I saw this season, particularly up until maybe October, certainly up until the long break for the pandemic, I think Odegaard can win that spot over Valverde or Modric.
Yeah, and to take it one step further, Dre, you mentioned it. You know, let's say Hazard and Benz are still their starting guys in that left zone and centrally as the 9. That right side, Zidane has used Asensio as a starter, Isco as a starter, Rodrigo as a starter, Vasquez as a starter. I think that Odegaard could actually, if Zidane continues to play with guys that will start on paper on the right, but then actually start playing a little bit more underneath, Odegaard could plug in two positions, could start there, or could replace at times Modric or even Kroos for that matter, because he's also getting a little bit older. So that flexibility that he has, and also he has a skill set that no other attacking midfielder, whatever you want to call it, has. He is actually, we talk about Frenkie De Jong, let's be a little bit more innovative, more aggressive. Odegaard is a guy that is like Asensio, technically good, but at the end of the day, he penetrates with and without the ball. I like that about Odegaard, and it gives Real Madrid a dimension they don't get from Asensio, for instance. As much as people say they love Asensio, I think at the end of the day, you get not much out of a player like him.
Yeah, I think, by the way, it's also very significant that it is Zidane who reached out to the player and said he wants him back at the Bernabeu, which reportedly, the news coming out of Spain, caught Real Sociedad off guard because they were hoping to count on Odegaard. But the fact that Zidane himself said, no, I think you're ready, you need to come back to Real Madrid, suggests there will be a significant role for him to play. Just want to answer this one question. Richard Murray asked, Dre, does Valverde transfer from Real Madrid? I think Fede Valverde has a future at Real Madrid. I think even if you bring Odegaard and there is that competition, there will be minutes for Valverde, so I don't see him transferring out. It's not out of the question. They had initially sent him on loan to Deportivo, where he was actually quite good. But I do think maybe Modric would be more likely to move just so he can get one more big payday, perhaps, or just because of his age. Let's move along to the Europa League, because yesterday we saw two teams go through, Manchester United and Inter. Both were favored to go through, both did. Today, Sevilla take on Wolves. Thomas, let's focus in on that game for a moment. Sevilla are known as kings of the Europa League. Do you see Sevilla getting past Wolves, or is the Premier League side the one that's advancing?
No, I mean, Sevilla showed against, you can say Roma, maybe not great on the day, but Sevilla shown in this competition, and in the restart, by the way, outside of Real Madrid, to be the second best team in La Liga. And we're talking Atletico Madrid, we're talking about Barcelona. That's been pretty impressive, and you got to give the brass up front, again, Monchi and obviously their head coach, a lot of credit. So this team, I think, is better offensively. This team does give up some goals. Wolves, under their head coach, have had a great year as well. Inter Milan versus Man United is probably the favorite in terms of media. That's the game we want. But I'm telling you, the winner of Sevilla Wolves will give Man United a run for their money.
Yeah, I actually been really impressed with how Sevilla have looked all season long, not just sort of post-pandemic. I haven't seen as much of Wolves because we don't cover the Premier League on a day-to-day basis with the amount of leagues that we do cover. But this has been just historically much the same way as Real Madrid sort of transform and become the best version of themselves, usually in the Champions League. We see the same thing out of Sevilla. And I have questions about whether this format actually does favor Sevilla or not, because Sevilla were actually one of those few teams that seem to be better away from home than they were the Sanchez Pizjuan. I don't know what that means or how that translates into these one-offs, single elimination format, but it will be fun to watch. Before we leave, just one more thing, because we didn't get a chance to talk about it in the transfer train, but Take Kubo, who is still a Real Madrid player, is going on loan to Villarreal. I love the team that Villarreal are building, Thomas. We'll get a chance to talk about it later in the week, but it looks as they're also going to get Dani Parejo, potentially on a free transfer, and Francis Coquelin, both from Valencia. Valencia are falling apart, and Villarreal are arguably going to be a lot better for it. I can see a Villarreal team that's going to have Parejo, Trigueros, and Coquelin in the midfield, Samu, Chukwueze, Gerard, and Kubo up top. That is a really, really good top six that can compete for the top 3 spot in La Liga. With that, we are fresh out of time. For Thomas Rongen, I'm Andres Cordero. You saw part of that interview with Frenkie De Jong at the beginning of the show. Keep an eye on beINsports.com. We'll post the full 20-minute video there shortly. Thanks for joining us. Goodbye.